The Gilded Lyre was not a restaurant. It was a theater of wealth, where the clinking of crystal was the applause and the scent of truffle oil was the air itself. For Clara, a 19-year-old girl with eyes the color of a stormy sea and hands that were never quite still, it was a gilded cage. Every night, she wore the stiff, charcoal-gray uniform like a suit of armor, navigating the labyrinth of tables where fortunes were discussed over plates of food that cost more than her monthly rent. She moved with a practiced invisibility, a ghost in the machine of luxury, her own dreams tucked away like a folded napkin in her pocket. Her life existed in the harsh contrast between this opulent world and the small, quiet apartment where she cared for her ailing grandmother. The medical bills a relentless tide against which she was the only barrier. Her only escape was in books, specifically books on linguistics, the beautiful, intricate architecture of dead and living languages, a private solace that no one here could touch or tarnish. This secret world of words was her own, a silent rebellion against the crushing weight of her reality. The queen of this gilded cage was Veronica, a senior waitress whose smile was as sharp and cold as the knives she polished. Veronica had worked at the Gilded Lyre for a decade, and she wore her seniority like a crown, her gaze a constant, dismissive assessment of everyone she deemed beneath her. And to Veronica, everyone was beneath her, especially the new, quiet girl who seemed to carry a world of sorrow in her posture. Tonight, the pressure was immense. A renowned food critic was rumored to be dining incognito, and the entire staff moved with the tense, fragile energy of a held breath. Clara was meticulously arranging the silverware on table 12 when Veronica glided over, her presence casting a sudden chill. "Clara," she began, her voice a low purr that did nothing to conceal its venom. The bread basket for the DuPont table was not warm to precisely 105 degrees. It was lukewarm. "Do you understand the level of incompetence that represents?" Clara's cheeks burned. It was a lie, a fabrication designed to undermine her in front of the other staff. "I checked it myself, Veronica." The temperature was correct. Veronica let out a small, theatrical laugh that drew the attention of the junior busboys. "Oh, you checked it? With what, your peasant intuition? People like the DuPonts can taste the difference between effort and laziness. People like you wouldn't understand. Your palate is probably more accustomed to instant noodles." The insult landed with surgical precision. A public dissection of her class, her life, her very being. The restaurant manager, a man whose spine was made of jelly, overheard the exchange and simply gave Clara a warning look, a silent command to submit. Clara lowered her head, the heat of shame rising to her eyes. "Yes, Veronica. It won't happen again." She retreated to the kitchens, her hands trembling, the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. She felt utterly and completely alone, a forgotten footnote in a story written in gold ink. It was in this state of quiet despair that she saw them enter. An older woman, regal and severe, dressed in a flowing gown of deep emerald silk, and a man who followed a half-step behind her, a silent, watchful guardian. He was tall, with a stillness that seemed to absorb the restaurant's ambient noise, his dark suit impeccably tailored, his face a study in controlled intensity. The entire room shifted its gravity to orbit them. The manager rushed forward, bowing and scraping, offering them the best table, the one with the panoramic view of the city lights. Veronica, sensing power, immediately inserted herself, her cold smile replaced by a mask of fawning deference. The older woman, however, seemed unimpressed. She spoke in a language that silenced the room, its cadence soft and melodic, yet her tone was laced with an unmistakable thread of irritation. She was tired, she was uncomfortable, and she was not interested in the pantomime of service being offered. Veronica's smile faltered as she failed to understand, resorting to loud, slow English and exaggerated hand gestures, treating the elegant matriarch like a confused tourist. The woman's expression soured further, her lips tightening into a thin, disapproving line. The man, her son, watched the exchange with a look of profound weariness, his dark eyes scanning the room as if searching for a single, authentic thing in a world of performance. Clara, standing near the service station, felt a jolt of recognition. The language, the beautiful, complex syntax. It was the very dialect she had been studying for the past year, the one she practiced from worn-out textbooks in the dead of night. It felt like a secret key had just appeared in her hand. The old woman, whose name Clara would later learn was Fatima, grew more agitated. She gestured toward the heavy velvet curtains, speaking a sharp phrase to her son. Veronica, misinterpreting, began to offer her a different wine. Fatima sighed, a sound of pure exasperation, and in that moment, she dropped the delicate silk shawl that had been draped over her arm. It pooled on the floor, a splash of emerald against the dark wood. Before Veronica could lunge for it, Clara moved. She glided forward, her movements swift and silent, and bent down. As she picked up the shawl, its fabric impossibly soft against her fingers, she looked directly at Fatima. In a low, respectful voice, she spoke a single, perfect sentence in the woman's native tongue, the words flowing from her as if she had been born to say them. "Your shawl is as beautiful as the evening star, madam. Please allow me." The world stopped. The clatter of the kitchen faded. The hum of conversation ceased. Fatima's eyes, which had been hard and dismissive, widened in astonishment. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face, transforming her severe features into something warm and luminous. She replied in her language, her voice now gentle, thanking the young waitress with a grace that Veronica's fawning could never have elicited. But it was the man, Khalid, who reacted most profoundly. He had been a statue of polite indifference, but now he was utterly transfixed. He leaned forward, his entire being focused on Clara, his dark eyes filled with a sudden, blazing intensity. He watched the quiet exchange between his mother and this unassuming waitress, and when Clara finally rose and met his gaze, he spoke, his voice a low, resonant murmur that seemed meant for her alone. "You," he said, the single word hanging in the air, charged with disbelief and wonder. "You just stole my heart." The silence that followed his words was absolute, a vacuum in which Veronica's carefully constructed world began to implode. Her face, a moment ago a mask of professional servitude, was now a canvas of raw, unfiltered shock and fury. The manager stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, unable to process the sudden, dramatic shift in power. Khalid's gaze never left Clara. It was not the predatory look of a wealthy man accustomed to getting what he wanted. It was something far more profound, a look of discovery, of someone who had been walking through a desert and had just stumbled upon an oasis. "From now on," he announced, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument, "this young lady will be our server for the evening. No one else is to approach this table." He gestured for Clara to come closer, a silent invitation into their world. Veronica looked as though she had been slapped. She opened her mouth to protest, to reassert her seniority, but a single, glacial look from Khalid froze the words in her throat. Defeated, she turned and stalked away, her retreat a public admission of her sudden irrelevance. Clara, her heart hammering against her ribs, moved to the table on unsteady legs. Fatima was beaming at her, patting the seat beside her as if inviting an old friend. Throughout the meal, a strange and beautiful magic unfolded. Clara took their order, not as a servant, but as a translator of cultures, explaining the nuances of the chef's creations in Fatima's language. The old woman, who had seemed so cold and difficult, was now warm and animated, sharing stories of her home, her garden, her grandchildren, all in the soft, flowing cadences of her mother tongue. Clara listened, her responses measured and respectful, her quiet dignity a stark contrast to the performative service the restaurant prided itself on. And all the while Khalid watched. He ate little, spoke less, but his eyes followed Clara's every move, tracing the line of her jaw, the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the gentle focus in her eyes as she spoke with his mother. He was not just seeing a waitress. He was seeing a scholar, a diplomat, a kind soul who had offered his mother a moment of genuine human connection in a place that specialized in artifice. The stakes had been irrevocably raised. For Clara, it was a dizzying glimpse of a world of respect and kindness she had never known. For Veronica, simmering in the shadows, it was a declaration of war. This girl, this nobody, had not just upstaged her. She had made her invisible. And Veronica would not tolerate being made invisible. The evening ended in a soft glow of warmth and quiet conversation. When Khalid signed the bill, he added a tip so generous it made Clara's breath catch in her throat, enough to cover her grandmother's medical expenses for 3 months. But it was what he did next that truly mattered. As she was changing out of her uniform in the staff locker room, a junior waiter knocked timidly on the door. "Clara? That man, Mr. Al-Jamil. He's waiting for you by the service exit." A knot of anxiety and excitement tightened in her stomach. She slipped on her worn coat, her heart thudding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. She found him standing in the cool night air of the alleyway, away from the glittering facade of the restaurant. The city lights framed him, but he seemed entirely separate from the urban chaos, a point of stillness in a spinning world. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, his voice softer now, without the hard edge of command he had used inside. "My mother. I have not seen her smile like that in a very long time. You gave her a gift tonight. A piece of home." Clara felt a blush creep up her neck. She was a pleasure to speak with. It was an honor. He took a step closer, the distance between them shrinking. "You study languages?" he asked, his curiosity genuine. "In my spare time," she admitted. "I buy old textbooks. I find them beautiful. The way people connect through words," his expression softened. "Beauty in hidden things." I understand that. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the faint lines of worry etched around her mouth. He saw past the uniform, past the role she was forced to play. For the first time all night, Clara felt seen not as a servant, but as a person. Before he left, he handed her a simple, elegant business card. On it was his name, Khalid Al-Jamil, and a single phone number. "This is my private line," he said, his gaze holding hers. "If you ever find yourself in need of anything, or if you simply wish to speak of beautiful, hidden things, please do not hesitate to call." The gesture was so far beyond the realm of her experience that she could only nod, clutching the card as if it were a precious artifact. As his black car pulled away from the curb, Clara stood in the alley, the cold air on her cheeks, a fragile, unfamiliar feeling blooming in her chest. It was hope. The next few days were a blur of nervous energy. Clara half expected Veronica's wrath to descend upon her, but instead, she was met with a chilling, saccharine sweetness. Veronica was polite to a fault, calling her dear and offering to help with her tables, her eyes gleaming with a predatory light that made Clara's skin crawl. It was the calm before a storm, the terrible silence of a predator stalking its prey. Veronica was not one for direct confrontation when a more insidious method was available. She was planting seeds of doubt among the staff, whispering about how Clara must have done something inappropriate to gain such favor with the wealthy guest, suggesting a manipulative nature hidden beneath her quiet exterior. Then the trap was sprung. It happened during a busy Friday service. A wealthy regular, a woman known for her ostentatious jewelry, claimed her diamond earring was missing. A frantic, theatrical search ensued, led by a deeply concerned Veronica. Of course, the search led to the staff lockers. The manager, flanked by security, demanded they all be opened. When they opened Clara's, there it was, nestled inside her worn copy of a linguistics textbook, a glittering diamond earring. Clara stared at it, her blood turning to ice. She had been framed so perfectly, so viciously. I don't know how that got there," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Veronica let out a gasp of feigned horror. "Oh, Clara, I never would have believed it. To steal from a guest. After all the chances you've been given." The manager's face was a mask of grim disappointment. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said, his tone leaving no room for appeal. "We have a zero-tolerance policy. We have to call the authorities." The words hit her like a physical blow. The police, a criminal record, her entire future, her ability to care for her grandmother. Everything was about to be destroyed by a lie. The walls of the room seemed to be closing in, the whispers of her colleagues a suffocating roar in her ears. She was trapped, utterly and completely. Panic seized her, cold and absolute. Her mind raced, searching for an escape, a lifeline. Then, through the fog of fear, she remembered the small, stiff business card tucked safely in her wallet. Khalid al-Khamil. If you ever find yourself in need of anything. It felt like a desperate, foolish long shot, a plea to a man from another universe. But she had nothing left to lose. Excusing herself to the restroom for a moment before the manager made the call. Her hands shaking so badly she could barely dial, she pressed the number. She expected a secretary, an assistant, a voicemail. But he answered on the second ring, his voice calm and clear, as if he had been waiting. "Clara?" he said, and the sound of her name spoken with such quiet certainty was enough to make her sob. "They think I stole something," she whispered, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "They're going to call the police. An earring. Veronica. She put it in my locker. I know she did, but no one will believe me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, not of hesitation, but of thought. When he spoke again, his voice was like steel. "Where are you right now?" she told him. "Good," he said. "Do not say another word to anyone. Do not admit to anything. Do not deny anything. Just stand there and wait." "I am on my way," he disconnected before she could even reply. The finality in his tone was terrifying and comforting all at once. She walked back out to the manager's office, her face pale but her expression strangely calm. The manager looked at her, his hand hovering over the phone. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Clara?" Veronica stood behind him, a look of triumphant pity on her face. Clara took a deep breath, remembering Khalid's instructions. "I will wait," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The manager frowned, confused by her lack of hysterics. "Wait for what?" Before Clara could answer, the doors to the restaurant swung open with a force that made everyone turn. Khalid al-Jamil stood there, not in a suit this time, but in casual, elegant clothes that somehow made him look even more powerful. He wasn't flanked by lawyers or security. He was alone, yet his presence commanded the entire space. He walked directly toward the manager's office, his eyes locking onto Clara with a look of fierce protectiveness that made her feel safe for the first time in her life. The showdown had begun. The air in the manager's office crackled with tension. Khalid didn't bother with pleasantries. He walked past the stunned manager and stood beside Clara, a silent, unshakable pillar of support. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," he stated, his voice low and dangerously calm. The manager, flustered by the unexpected arrival of the billionaire who had left such an impression days earlier, stammered, "Mr. Al-Jamil, I'm afraid this is an internal staff matter. This employee has been accused of theft." Veronica stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "We are all so shocked. We found the missing earring in her locker." Khalid turned his head slowly, fixing Veronica with a gaze so cold it could have frozen fire. "Did you now?" he murmured. He then turned back to the manager. "A few weeks ago, my company's technology division was contracted to perform a security overhaul for this hotel chain. As a favor to the board, I personally oversaw the final diagnostic phase. We installed a new, state-of-the-art surveillance system. Microcameras, undetectable to the naked eye, covering every public and staff-only area. Including the locker room. Veronica's face went white. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a sickly, gray pallor. Khalid pulled a slim tablet from his briefcase. With a few taps of his finger, he turned the screen toward the manager. On it, crystal-clear footage began to play. It showed Veronica, her face contorted with malice, looking over her shoulder before slipping the diamond earring into Clara's textbook. It then showed her discovering it with theatrical shock. The room was utterly silent, the only sound the faint, damning audio from the recording. The truth was not just told. It was shown, irrefutable and absolute. "It seems," Khalid said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "that the wrong person is being accused." He then looked at the manager, his expression hardening. "And as of this morning, my holding company finalized its acquisition of a majority stake in this hotel group, which means technically you work for me." and I have a zero-tolerance policy for staff who allow liars and thieves to victimize the innocent. He swiveled his gaze back to Veronica, who was now trembling, her facade shattered, revealing the pathetic, cruel person beneath. You are fired. Your personal effects will be mailed to you. Security will escort you from the building. Now, the aftermath was a quiet revolution. Veronica was led away, not with a dramatic scene, but with the quiet, humiliating finality of complete and utter defeat. The other staff members who had whispered and judged now avoided Clara's eyes, their faces a mixture of shame and awe. The manager, desperate to save his own job, began apologizing profusely, offering Clara anything she wanted. But it was Khalid who took control. He gently guided Clara away from the chaos, leading her out of the restaurant and into the crisp night air. He didn't speak of the incident, not right away. Instead, he simply stood with her, letting the silence be a balm on her wounded spirit. No one will ever treat you that way again, he finally said, his voice thick with a promise that felt as solid as the earth beneath her feet. That is not a world you belong in. In the following weeks, Clara's life transformed. She left the Gilded Liar, not as a disgraced employee, but with a glowing letter of recommendation and a settlement brokered by Khalid's lawyers that was more than she had ever dreamed of. But he offered her more than just financial security. He offered her a purpose. He had seen the scholar in her, the passion she had for the architecture of words. He established a foundation dedicated to funding linguistic research and preserving endangered languages, and he asked her to help run it. She was no longer serving tables. She was serving a cause that resonated with the deepest parts of her soul. She and Khalid spent hours together, not in opulent restaurants, but in quiet libraries and museums, their conversations weaving a tapestry of shared interests and deepening affection. He was drawn to her quiet strength, her brilliant mind, and the fundamental goodness that shone from her. She was drawn to his gentle heart, his fierce loyalty, and the way he saw her, truly saw her, for who she was. One evening, months later, they were in the Foundation's library, surrounded by the scent of old paper and leather-bound books. Khalid took her hand. He didn't have a ring, he didn't have a grand speech. He simply looked at her, his eyes reflecting the warm lamplight. The first time you spoke to my mother, he began, his voice soft. You spoke a language of kindness that I had almost forgotten existed. You build bridges with words. Clara, I want to spend the rest of my life on the bridge you build with me. He asked her to marry him, there among the silent stories of the world. Her yes was a quiet whisper that held all the power and beauty of the languages she so dearly loved. Their wedding was not a grand spectacle for the society pages. It was an intimate affair, attended by his mother, Fatima, who embraced Clara as a daughter, and Clara's grandmother, now healthy and happy. They were married in a garden, under the evening star, a quiet testament to the fact that sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories begin with a single, unexpected word.